I am Zoya, 34 years old, and until last Tuesday, I genuinely believed I had finally escaped the suffocating grip of my toxic family. I run a highly successful defense cybersecurity firm, a detail I kept hidden to protect my peace. To my mother and older sister, I was just the dark-skinned disappointment who wasted her life in the military while they chased country club memberships and wealthy husbands. They ambushed me in the middle of a bank lobby, tore my $5 million federal deposit into pieces, and ordered armed guards to corner me and my crying 7-year-old son. They thought they had finally put me in my place. They had no idea I was about to dismantle their entire world. Before I tell you how this nightmare unfolded, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to look your abusers in the eye and take your power back. Growing up in a sprawling colonial home in Connecticut meant projecting a flawless image to the outside world while surviving emotional freezing on the inside. My sister Vanessa was the golden child celebrated for her light skin, her social climbing, and her relentless ambition. I was the scapegoat constantly criticized, hidden away, and treated like an unwanted guest in my own home. I joined the armed forces at 18 just to survive, eventually rising to the rank of colonel before starting my own defense contracting agency. The military was the first place in my life where the color of my skin and my refusal to conform to a superficial country club aesthetic were not viewed as liabilities. They were the very traits that forged my resilience. It was during my second deployment that I met Elias. Elias was a special operations commander with a heart of gold and a tactical mind as sharp as a scalpel. He didn't look at me and see a scapegoat. He saw a leader. He saw a woman worth loving fiercely. We married in a quiet, beautiful ceremony, with only our platoon in attendance. My mother and sister conveniently lost the invitation I never sent. When Leo was born, Elias held our tiny son in his strong arms and promised to build a fortress around him, a life completely free of the toxic vanity I had grown up with. 3 years ago, Elias kept half of that promise. He died securing a hot extraction zone for his team under heavy enemy fire. The military handed me a folded flag, a set of silver dog tags, and the survivor benefits that were meant to replace a father's lifetime of provision and love. That money was sacred. It was Elias's final act of protection. The fact that Vanessa and Loretta were actively plotting to steal, it wasn't just financial greed. It was a disgusting desecration of a war hero's legacy. I kept my distance, but last week, my mother insisted I meet Vanessa at her bank to discuss a family trust issue. She called it an olive branch. I should have known it was a trap. The marble floors of First Sterling Bank echoed under my boots. I held my 7-year-old son Leo tightly by the hand. He is a quiet boy, sensitive to loud noises, since losing his father 3 years ago. I approached the teller counter to make a business deposit. Before the teller could greet me, Vanessa stepped out from her glass-walled office. She wore a tailored designer suit, her hair perfectly styled, and her face twisted into the exact sneer she had used to terrorize me since childhood. "You have some nerve walking into my branch looking like a vagrant Zoya," Vanessa announced. Her voice was loud, deliberately designed to turn the heads of the elite clientele waiting nearby. I placed my check on the counter. "I am here to make a deposit, Vanessa. Step aside and let the teller do his job." Vanessa let out a sharp, condescending laugh. "A deposit? What are you depositing today? Your sad little unemployment check. Mom told me you are begging for scraps right now. You threw away a real future to go play with computers in your basement. This bank is for people building a legacy, not for broke single mothers." Before the teller could even look at my document, Vanessa snatched it from the marble surface. She did not look at the numbers. She glared at me, her eyes burning with unchecked resentment. "Or what?" a deep voice chimed in from behind her. Bradley, Vanessa's white husband, strolled out of her office, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit. He came from old New England money, carrying an air of absolute entitlement. He slipped his arm around Vanessa's waist, looking me up and down with pure disgust. "Listen to your sister Zoya," Bradley said, his tone dripping with privileged superiority. "You are scaring the real clients. Take your kid and go back to whatever subsidized housing you are living in. Do not make me have these guards arrest you in front of your boy." He snapped his fingers. Immediately, 3 armed bank security guards moved in, forming a tight semicircle behind me. The heavy thud of their boots caused Leo to start crying in earnest. His small hands gripped my coat desperately. "I am not leaving without my deposit," I stated, staring dead into Bradley's pale blue eyes. "And if those guards touch me or my son, there will be severe consequences." Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. "Always making empty threats. You are a complete failure." She tore the $5 million check straight down the middle. She dropped the pieces onto the floor, kicking them toward my boots. "Oops, looks like your deposit got lost in the system. Guards, escort this woman out. If she resists, call Child Protective Services. This child clearly is not safe with a deranged mother." I slowly knelt down, picked up the torn pieces, and stood back up, smoothing out the paper. "You just destroyed a $5 million federal deposit, Vanessa," I said, my voice eerily calm. Bradley let out a harsh laugh. $5 million, oh please. You are completely delusional, Zoya. Guards, grab her right now." "Ma'am, put your hands behind your back," the head security guard ordered, stepping directly into my personal space. The heavy brass doors of the private elevator at the far end of the lobby suddenly chimed loudly. They slid open with a sharp mechanical hiss. Mr. Richard Sterling, the billionaire chief executive officer of First Sterling Bank, burst out of the elevator. He was sprinting across the polished marble floor. His face was completely drained of color. "Stop right there," Mr. Sterling shouted. His voice cracked with absolute panic. "Do not touch her. Step back immediately." He shoved his way through the security guards. The guards froze instantly. They stepped away in total confusion. Mr. Sterling stopped exactly 2 feet in front of me. He was breathing very heavily. He lowered his head in a deep and respectful bow. "Colonel," Mr. Sterling uttered. His voice shook with a potent mix of terror and deep reverence. "I sincerely apologize for this completely unacceptable reception." The entire bank lobby stopped breathing. Vanessa let her jaw drop open. "Colonel," Vanessa stammered. "Mr. Sterling, there is a massive misunderstanding here. She is my sister Zoya. She is a total nobody. Bradley and I were just having security remove her because she is having a violent mental breakdown." Mr. Sterling spun around quickly. He pointed a trembling finger directly at Vanessa's face. "Shut your mouth right now, Vanessa," Mr. Sterling roared. "You are speaking to Colonel Zoya Washington. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Aegis Cyber Defense. She is the woman who just bought out this bank's entire international security contract 20 minutes ago." Bradley stepped back instantly. His arrogant posture melted into pure shock. "What contract are you talking about? She does not have any money." "The $500 million Department of Defense contract, Bradley," I said. I picked up the 2 torn halves of the check. "This was the $5 million good faith deposit for the federal escrow account, which your wife just deliberately destroyed in front of multiple witnesses." "Vanessa," Mr. Sterling gasped, "do you know what you have just done to this institution today?" "It has to be fake," Vanessa cried. I pulled my encrypted mobile device from my pocket. "Mr. Sterling, I am ordering an immediate and full-scale federal audit of this entire branch. Nobody leaves this building until my private security team arrives to seize the servers." Before Vanessa could formulate another pathetic excuse, my phone began to ring loudly. The caller identification flashed across the bright screen. It was my mother, Loretta. I answered the call, hearing her scream to leave my sister alone immediately. "Zoya, you listen to me right now!" my mother shrieked through the speaker of my encrypted phone. Her voice echoed in the massive marble lobby. "Bradley just sent me an emergency text message. He said you are threatening Vanessa and trying to ruin her career with some fabricated military nonsense. You call off this ridiculous audit, immediately grab that delinquent child of yours and get out of her bank." I looked at Vanessa, who was trembling beside her husband. Bradley had gone pale, realizing the woman he tried to arrest was now the largest security shareholder of the institution that employed his wife. Leo squeezed my hand and I stroked his hair. "I am not fabricating anything, Mother," I replied, keeping my voice incredibly level and calm. Vanessa just deliberately destroyed a $5 million federal deposit. She violated federal banking laws, and Bradley attempted to unlawfully detain a contractor. The federal audit is happening. My security team is already en route to seize the servers. You are a liar and a disgrace to this family, Loretta screamed. Vanessa has worked her entire life to build a respectable legacy. She married a wealthy man. You will bring yourself to my house tomorrow and apologize to Vanessa and Bradley in front of everyone. If you refuse to do this, I will testify against you in family court. My grip on the phone tightened. Testify against me for exactly what? I will tell the judge that your military service left you unstable, my mother threatened. I will help Bradley and Vanessa call Child Protective Services. We will take custody of Leo and you will never see your son again. You will be at dinner tomorrow and you will fix this mess. She instantly disconnected the call with a sharp click. Vanessa smirked. They believed my mother's threat to steal my child would force me to surrender. They thought the old family dynamics would still work on me. They were spectacularly wrong. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. I looked directly at Mr. Sterling, who was still standing at strict attention. Mr. Sterling, my private cyber division will arrive in 4 minutes. Cooperate fully. Nobody deletes a single file. Yes, Colonel. Mr. Sterling responded very quickly, nodding his head. You have my absolute cooperation. I did not spare another glance at my sister or her husband. I turned around holding my son's hand and walked out through the revolving glass doors. We climbed into my waiting armored vehicle. I was not going to yell or cry today. I was going to dismantle their entire existence. When we arrived at the headquarters of Aegis Cyber Defense, I escorted Leo to his secure playroom. Once I knew he was safe and happily occupied with his toys, I walked into the main glass conference room. My top legal counsel and 3 cybersecurity analysts were waiting. They stood up respectfully as I entered. I need a full federal background check and an exhaustive financial deep dive. I ordered, taking my seat at the head of the polished table. The primary targets are Bradley and Vanessa. I want every bank statement, tax return, hidden offshore account, and legal document related to Bradley's old money family trust. Pull absolutely everything you can find. My team went to work immediately, their fingers flying across their keyboards. For 3 solid hours, I sat in my office reviewing active contracts, waiting for the comprehensive results. I knew my mother and sister worshipped Bradley solely because of his supposed wealth and social status. If they were bold enough to threaten my custody of Leo, they had to be hiding something massive to justify that level of extreme desperation. My lead analyst knocked on my door and walked in holding a digital dossier. He projected the findings onto the large screen mounted on the wall. What I saw made a cold smile spread across my face. Colonel, the wealth is a complete illusion. My analyst reported, highlighting several redacted documents. Bradley's family trust went bankrupt 2 years ago. His father made terrible investments and lost absolutely everything. Bradley and Vanessa have been drowning in massive, unmanageable debt. They have 3 secret mortgages on their primary estate. They are facing imminent financial ruin. I stared at the foreclosure notices displayed on the screen. If they are completely broke, why are they fighting so hard to maintain this wealthy facade? And why would they suddenly threaten to take custody of my son? My lead legal counsel stepped forward, pulling up another specific financial document. Because of this, Colonel, we cross-referenced Leo's federal records. When your husband died in combat, the military awarded a highly classified life insurance payout. That money sits in a protected trust for Leo until he turns 18. The current value of that survivor trust is just over $8 million. The pieces of the complex puzzle slammed together in my mind with terrifying clarity. Vanessa and Bradley did not care about family loyalty. My mother did not care about Leo's well-being. They were completely desperate for cash. They planned to use my mother's false testimony to declare me an unfit parent, take full custody of my son, and gain immediate access to his $8 million survivor trust fund to pay off their mounting debts. They were actively trying to steal my dead husband's legacy to save their own pathetic lifestyle. I dismissed my incredibly loyal team for the day. I stood up and looked out at the sprawling city skyline. My mother had demanded I attend her Sunday family dinner tomorrow to apologize. She wanted me to bow my head and submit to their abuse like I always did when I was a helpless child. I picked up my mobile phone and sent a short text message confirming my attendance. I was going to show up exactly as she demanded, but I was absolutely not bringing a heartfelt apology. I was bringing a swift, brutal financial guillotine. But before I stepped onto the battlefield of my childhood home, I needed to ensure my own emotional armor was entirely impenetrable. I spent that Saturday evening sitting on the edge of Leo's bed, watching his chest rise and fall as he slept peacefully. I traced the silver chain of Elias's dog tags resting against my collarbone. I had spent years in professional therapy, unlearning the insidious lies my mother had planted in my mind, the lie that I was difficult to love, the lie that my darkness was a stain on their pristine white canvas. Leaving Leo's room, I met with Miller, my head of personal security, in the dimly lit hallway. Miller was a former Navy SEAL who had served directly under Elias. "The perimeter for tomorrow is mapped and secure," Colonel Miller reported in a hushed, serious tone. "We have 2 armored Suburbans prepped. I'll personally be in the vehicle with Leo at the end of the driveway. Nobody approaches the reinforced glass without my explicit authorization." I nodded, handing him a digital layout of my mother's sprawling estate. "They think they are dealing with the terrified teenager who ran away from this house 16 years ago, Miller. They don't realize they are about to sit down with a defense contractor who dismantles foreign cyber syndicates before breakfast. Keep the engine running. I won't be staying for dessert." The heavy oak doors of my childhood home loomed before me the following evening. I left Leo safely secured in my armored vehicle parked at the end of the long driveway. He was guarded by 2 of my best operatives. I was not going to expose my son to the toxicity inside that house. I pushed the front door open without knocking. The grand dining room was buzzing with quiet conversation and the clinking of expensive crystal. My mother Loretta sat at the head of the long mahogany table. Vanessa and Bradley sat on the right side. An empty chair waited silently on the left. There was no plate, there was no silverware, there was no glass, just a bare expanse of polished wood. "You are late, Zoya," Loretta announced, not bothering to look up as she carved the roasted lamb. "I suppose military time does not apply when you are disrespecting your own family." I took my empty seat, placing my encrypted tablet face down on the table. "I am exactly on time, Mother." Loretta passed a silver platter of meat directly to Bradley, offering him a warm smile. She handed the serving bowl of potatoes to Vanessa. She completely bypassed me, setting the empty dishes aside. It was a familiar punishment. Growing up, food was a weapon she used to establish hierarchy. The lighter-skinned daughter got the best cuts of meat. The darker-skinned daughter got whatever was left over. "We did not set a place for you because we assumed you would not be staying long," Vanessa sneered, cutting into her meal. "You are just here to apologize and leave. You have already caused enough damage to our reputation this weekend." I folded my hands and leaned back in my chair. "I am not here to apologize to anyone, Vanessa." Bradley dropped his fork. The metal clattered loudly against his fine china plate. He wiped his mouth with a napkin and leveled a cold, condescending glare at me. "You really do not understand the precarious position you are in, do you, Zoya? You marched into my wife's bank, caused a massive public disturbance, and humiliated her in front of her superiors. You are unstable. Your time in the armed forces has clearly broken your mind." "My mind is perfectly sharp, Bradley," I replied, watching a bead of sweat form at his temple. He was projecting confidence, but his underlying financial terror was bleeding through his arrogant facade. Bradley reached into his tailored jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick stack of legal documents and slid them across the smooth mahogany table. They stopped right in front of my empty seat. The bold black letters on the top page read, "Transfer of custody and guardianship. We are giving you one final chance to handle this quietly," Bradley stated, his tone dripping with false benevolence. "We have already spoken to a family court judge. We have drafted a sworn affidavit detailing your violent outburst at the bank. Your mother is fully prepared to testify under oath that you suffer from severe untreated post-traumatic stress disorder. You are an unfit mother, Zoya. We are going to call Child Protective Services and have Leo removed from your care immediately." Loretta nodded vigorously, pointing her sharp knife directly at me. "It is for the best, Zoya. A child needs a stable 2-parent household. He needs wealth, proper schooling, and a mother who knows how to behave in civilized society. You are aggressive and unruly. Vanessa and Bradley can give Leo the beautiful life you are completely incapable of providing. I looked down at the custody papers, feeling a dangerous calm wash over my entire body. They were actually trying to steal my son. They were weaponizing my military service, the very career that had built my current empire, to paint me as a deranged threat to my own child. "So this is your grand solution," I said, tapping my fingers on the crisp, legal documents. "You fabricate a story about my mental health, drag me through family court, and take my 7-year-old son away. What exactly is the alternative you are offering me tonight?" Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. "Sign the papers right now. Grant us full legal custody of Leo. If you surrender your parental rights quietly, we will forgive your embarrassing behavior. We will not press criminal charges for the scene you caused at the bank. We will not have you involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility. You can walk away, go back to your pathetic little life, and we will raise Leo as a respectable member of this family." "And how exactly are you going to raise him?" I challenged, narrowing my eyes. "Raising a growing child is incredibly expensive, Vanessa. You both have a very lavish lifestyle to maintain." Vanessa rolled her eyes, letting her arrogance cloud her judgment. It was the fatal flaw I had been waiting for all evening. "Do not worry about the finances, Zoya. We are capable of managing his assets. In fact, we already know about the military survivor benefits left by your late husband. That trust fund needs proper management by people who actually understand wealth and investments. You are just letting $8 million sit in a basic account doing nothing. We will integrate it into our portfolio to secure his future." The silence that followed her statement was heavy and absolute. The trap had been sprung and she had walked right into it. "His survivor benefits," I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air. "You are not trying to save my son, Vanessa. You are trying to seize his $8 million trust fund." Bradley interjected quickly, his face flushing red. "It is about giving him a better life. You do not know how to handle that kind of capital. We do." I picked up the custody documents and pushed them back across the table. I picked up my encrypted tablet and unlocked the screen. "You do not know how to handle capital either, Bradley," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence of the dining room. "And I am about to show everyone in this room exactly why you are so desperately trying to steal money from a 7-year-old boy." I tapped a single icon on my screen. The massive 85-inch smart television mounted above the fireplace chimed softly. The display immediately switched from a serene landscape screensaver to a stark high-resolution projection of federal financial documents. The header of the first page was highlighted in bright red. It read, "Chapter 7 Bankruptcy Filing." Bradley lunged forward, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. "Turn that off right now. You have no right to access my private files." "These are public court records, Bradley," I replied calmly, swiping to the next slide. "If you wanted them to remain private, you probably should not have tried to unlawfully detain a federal defense contractor at a bank. You invited me to look into your life. Now we are all going to look at it together." The next document materialized on the screen. It was a formal notice of foreclosure for their primary estate. The outstanding debt was staggering. Vanessa stood up, her face drained of all color. "This is a fabrication. Bradley comes from one of the wealthiest families in New England. His trust fund is absolutely massive. You are just doctoring documents to make us look bad because you are jealous." "Your husband's trust fund evaporated 2 years ago, Vanessa," I stated, staring directly into her panicked eyes. "His father made incredibly reckless investments in commercial real estate and lost everything. There is no old money left. There is no trust fund. You are currently carrying 3 secret mortgages on your house. You are $3 million in debt, and the bank is officially seizing your property at the end of this month." Loretta dropped her silver carving knife. It clattered loudly against the serving platter. "Bradley, what is she talking about? Tell me this is one of Zoya's malicious lies." Bradley was visibly sweating now. He tugged at the collar of his custom-tailored shirt, struggling to formulate a coherent response. "Loretta, please do not listen to her. We just had a minor liquidity issue. It is a temporary cash flow problem due to market fluctuations. We are perfectly fine." "A temporary cash flow problem does not result in a federal tax lien." I countered, projecting yet another devastating document onto the screen. You owe the Internal Revenue Service over $400,000 in back taxes. You are entirely bankrupt. That is exactly why you need Leo's survivor benefits. You need his $8 million to save yourselves from federal prison and homelessness. Vanessa turned to Bradley, her voice trembling with rising hysteria. Bradley, tell me she is lying. Tell me we still have the money. Bradley refused to look at his wife. He stared at the mahogany table, his jaw clenched tight. His silence was the ultimate admission of guilt. He cannot tell you that, Vanessa, I said, keeping my posture completely relaxed. But the financial ruin is not even the most interesting part of this situation. The most fascinating discovery my cyber team made involves you, Mother. Loretta stiffened her eyes, darting between the television screen and my face. Leave me out of this, Zoya. I have nothing to do with their business ventures. You have everything to do with it, I corrected her. I swiped my tablet one more time. The screen changed to display a series of complex wire transfers. When Bradley's trust fund collapsed, he needed a new source of capital to maintain his wealthy white savior facade. He needed cash to keep up appearances at the country club, to pay for his luxury vehicles, and to fund Vanessa's designer wardrobe. I pointed to the highlighted account numbers on the screen. He started quietly withdrawing funds from a secondary source. He drained it slowly at first, and then in massive increments over the past 6 months. Do you recognize that account number, Mother? Loretta squinted at the glowing numbers on the television. Her face suddenly went completely slack. She grabbed the edge of the dining table as if the room had started spinning. That is my retirement account, Loretta whispered. Her voice was barely audible. That is the account where your father left my life savings. Yes, it is, I confirmed. Bradley forged your signature on a power of attorney document last year. He has systematically drained your entire retirement fund to pay for his secret gambling debts and his overdue mortgages. You have exactly $412 left to your name, Mother. Your golden child and her perfect husband have completely bankrupted you. Vanessa gasped, stepping away from Bradley as if he were suddenly toxic. You stole from my mother. How could you do that? I did it for us, Bradley shouted, finally losing his composure. You refused to cut back on your spending. You had to have the lavish vacations and the expensive jewelry. How was I supposed to pay for it all? I was trying to buy us time until we could secure the boys' trust fund. I expected my mother to turn her righteous fury onto Bradley. I expected her to scream at the man who had stolen her future. I expected her to finally see the absolute truth about the people she had blindly worshipped my entire life. Instead, Loretta slowly stood up from the head of the table. Her eyes were not fixed on Bradley. Her eyes were fixed squarely on me. Her chest heaved with rapid, erratic breaths. She marched around the table, her footsteps heavy and deliberate. She stopped directly in front of my chair. You, Loretta hissed, her voice trembling. You did this to ruin our family's image. She slapped me. The sharp sting of her hand against my cheek echoed through the silent dining room. I did not flinch. I did not raise my hand to touch my face. I simply sat there staring at the woman I had called my mother for 34 years. Loretta was shaking, her chest heaving as she glared down at me with unmasked hatred. You are not even mine, she screamed, her voice cracking with decades of venom. You are the product of your father's pathetic affair. I only kept you to save face in our church community. I endured your presence to maintain our respectable image, and this is how you repay me, by destroying my real daughter. Vanessa and Bradley watched in stunned silence. I slowly stood up from my chair, adjusting the cuffs of my jacket. That explains a lot, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. You can keep your image, Loretta, and you can keep your bankrupt, thieving golden child. Loretta pointed a trembling finger toward the heavy oak front doors. Get out of my house. I am leaving the entire estate to Vanessa and Bradley. You will not get a single cent. I picked up my encrypted tablet from the mahogany table. You have exactly $400 left to your name. There is no estate to leave. I turned my back on them and walked out the front doors into the pouring rain. My armored SUV was waiting at the end of the driveway. I climbed into the back seat, wrapping my arms around Leo, who was safely watching a movie on his headphones. The gloves were officially off. I was no longer playing nice. The next morning dawned bright and clear, washing away the remnants of the storm. I woke up in my secure penthouse apartment in downtown Chicago, feeling a profound sense of liberation. The toxic ties had been severed completely. I decided to make Leo his favorite breakfast to celebrate our new beginning. I left him in the care of my private security detail and walked down to the high-end grocery store on the corner of my street. I filled my basket with fresh organic berries, artisan pastries, and imported cheeses. I approached the checkout register with a light heart. The cashier, a polite young man, scanned my items and handed me the total. I pulled my personal civilian credit card from my wallet and inserted it into the terminal. The machine beeped sharply. The screen flashed a bright red error message: declined. I frowned slightly, pulling out a different personal debit card linked to another account. I tapped it against the reader. Another sharp beep. Declined. The cashier shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. I am sorry, ma'am. It says your accounts are frozen. Do you have another form of payment? I felt a sudden sharp prickle of suspicion. My personal accounts held millions of dollars in liquid assets. They were impeccably managed by a top-tier wealth management firm. There was absolutely no reason for a decline. I handed the cashier a $100 bill from my emergency cash reserve, collected my groceries, and stepped outside onto the bustling sidewalk. I set my grocery bags down on a nearby bench and pulled out my encrypted mobile device. I bypassed the standard customer service lines and dialed my private wealth manager directly. He answered on the second ring, sounding frantic. Colonel, I was just about to call you. Someone placed a hard freeze on all of your personal civilian accounts early this morning. They flagged your entire portfolio for severe fraudulent activity and money laundering. I narrowed my eyes, watching the city traffic flow past me. Who authorized the freeze? My wealth manager hesitated. It was initiated externally through First Sterling Bank's clearinghouse system. An executive override was used. The realization hit me instantly. Vanessa. Yesterday I had ordered a full federal audit of her branch, but the federal cyber team had locked down the servers at midnight. Vanessa must have used her remaining vice president clearance in the early hours of the morning, right before her access was permanently revoked, to maliciously target my social security number. She illegally froze my personal accounts. It was a desperate, vindictive attempt to starve me out. She was trying to create a documented financial crisis to prove I could not financially support my son. She wanted to present this fabricated evidence to Child Protective Services to bolster her absurd custody case. She genuinely believed that freezing my civilian credit cards would leave me destitute and begging for mercy. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Vanessa was so blinded by her arrogant desperation that she made a catastrophic, irreversible mistake. She did not realize the magnitude of the system she had just tampered with. My personal civilian accounts were not standard financial portfolios. Because of my status as a high-ranking military contractor, my personal banking profile was directly linked to my Department of Defense top-secret security clearance and my federal government payroll. Freezing those specific accounts maliciously did not just bounce a grocery store check. It acted as a highly classified military tripwire. By using an executive bank override to illegally freeze a federal contractor's assets, Vanessa had unknowingly triggered a Tier 1 federal cyber terrorism alert. The system automatically flagged her unauthorized intrusion as a direct attack on the United States military infrastructure. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Defense would now treat Vanessa's desperate petty retaliation as a coordinated national security threat. I picked up my grocery bags, my smile widening into a genuine grin. Vanessa wanted to play dirty financial games, but she had just brought a knife to a drone strike. The federal government was about to descend on her life, and I was going to enjoy watching every single second of her spectacular downfall. She thought she was untouchable. She was about to learn a very painful lesson in federal jurisdiction. I returned to my secure building, handing the groceries to my private security team to bring upstairs. I took the private elevator to my penthouse, my mind already calculating the precise timeline of the fallout. Vanessa's desperate move was already rippling through the highest levels of national security. I unlocked the front door and walked into the sunlit living room. Leo was sitting at the kitchen island, his feet dangling as he focused intently on his math homework. He looked up and smiled, completely unaware of the absolute chaos unfolding just miles away. I kissed the top of his head, unpacked the fresh berries, and set a small bowl in front of him. I needed to keep his environment completely stable. I knew my mother and sister were not going to stop at freezing my accounts. They needed physical proof of my supposed instability to expedite their custody theft. They needed a dramatic documented scene. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street below. I did not have to wait long. Approximately 45 minutes later, the screech of tires echoed up from the avenue. 3 local police cruisers and an unmarked white sedan aggressively mounted the curb right outside my building's main entrance. I watched as 6 uniformed police officers jumped out, their hands resting cautiously on their duty belts. 2 civilian women holding clipboards stepped out of the white sedan, looking incredibly nervous. Child Protective Services. Bradley and Vanessa had actually done it. They had weaponized the local authorities, feeding them a fabricated story about a dangerous broke veteran having a violent psychological break. The intercom buzzed sharply. My head of security's voice came through the speaker, sounding tense but controlled. Colonel, we have local law enforcement and social workers at the primary gate. They are demanding immediate entry. They claim they have an emergency welfare mandate. I sipped my coffee. Let them through the gate, but hold them at the lobby barricade. I will come down to meet them. I turned to Leo, who was happily eating his strawberries. I need to speak to some people downstairs for a few minutes, baby. Stay right here with your tutor. I took the elevator down to the ground floor. The lobby doors opened, revealing a highly volatile scene. The local police officers were shouting at my armed private security detail, demanding they lower the barricades. The CPS workers were hovering behind the officers, clutching their clipboards. I stepped forward, my posture relaxed, my hands empty and visible. Is there a problem here, officers? I asked, my voice projecting calm authority across the tense lobby. The lead officer, a burly man with his hand hovering over his holster, stepped forward aggressively. Are you Zoya Washington? We received a highly credible emergency report that you are experiencing a severe mental health crisis. We were informed that you have been completely cut off financially, that you are exhibiting violent behavior, and that your 7-year-old son is currently in immediate danger of starvation and physical harm. Step aside. We are entering the premises to take custody of the child. I did not move a single muscle. I looked directly into the officer's eyes. My son is perfectly safe upstairs doing his math homework after a healthy breakfast. You do not have a warrant to enter my private residence, and you certainly do not have jurisdiction to bypass my security detail based on a malicious fabricated phone call from my estranged sister and her bankrupt husband. The CPS worker piped up from the back. Ma'am, we have documented proof that your financial accounts are completely frozen. You have no means to provide for the child. You need to cooperate, or the police will use force to remove him. The lead police officer pulled his baton. This is your last warning. Stand down, or you will be arrested for obstructing an emergency welfare investigation. My security team instinctively tightened their formation, ready to defend me. The local police officers raised their voices, preparing to breach the line. The tension was suffocating. They thought I was just a desperate, broke single mother trying to hide her misery. Before the local officer could take another step, the heavy glass doors of the lobby shattered the silence as they were thrown wide open. 4 massive matte black tactical SUVs had silently pulled up onto the sidewalk directly behind the police cruisers. 12 federal agents wearing dark suits and tactical gear swarmed into the lobby. They moved with a terrifying synchronized precision that instantly paralyzed the local cops. The lead federal agent, a tall, imposing man holding a classified digital tablet, walked straight through the line of local police officers as if they did not even exist. He stopped directly in front of the local police sergeant. Stand down immediately, the federal agent commanded, flashing a gold badge that caught the lobby lights. You are interfering with a Tier 1 national security asset. The local cops froze, hands dropping away from their weapons. The CPS workers backed up against the glass walls, their faces draining of color. What are you talking about? The local sergeant stammered, completely losing his aggressive posture. We have an emergency child welfare report. The federal agent ignored him and turned to face me. He snapped to rigid attention. Colonel Washington, we detected the unauthorized executive override on your clearance-linked financial accounts at 0600 hours. We have tracked the origin of the cyber attack directly to a vice president terminal at First Sterling Bank. I smiled an expression of absolute satisfaction. I looked at the terrified local police officers and the trembling social workers. You can tell the people who sent you that their little welfare check is over, but their federal indictment has just begun. I turned back around to the federal agent giving the final command. Execute the raid on the bank. Go arrest them all. The heavy glass doors shut as federal agents moved out, leaving the local police standing in stunned silence. I did not wait to watch them scramble. I stepped into the private elevator, and rode up to my penthouse. When the doors opened, the safety of my home washed over me. Leo was at the kitchen island, his pencil hovering over a worksheet. He offered a bright smile that instantly grounded me. I kissed his forehead and helped him finish. I kept my phone on silent for the rest of the day. I wanted to give the authorities time to sweep First Sterling Bank, seize servers, and dismantle Vanessa's fake corporate empire. The sheer efficiency of the federal raid on First Sterling Bank was a terrifying testament to the absolute power of Aegis cyber defense. Sitting in the quiet safety of my penthouse, I watched the live encrypted feed on my dual monitors. My top analysts had already breached Vanessa's deeply hidden offshore routing protocols hours before the FBI even shattered the bank's physical lobby doors. We watched digital dominoes fall in real time. Vanessa had been spectacularly sloppy. In her arrogant belief that her vice president title made her untouchable, she had left massive, undeniable digital footprints across unencrypted servers. She had used her bank email to communicate directly with Bradley's fraudulent shell companies. She had logged into her mother's drained retirement account from her corporate IP address. My team packaged every single keystroke, every illegal wire transfer, and every forged digital signature into a pristine, irrefutable evidence file. We didn't just hand the federal government a prime suspect. We handed them a fully prosecuted case wrapped in a neat digital bow. By 3:00 a.m., First Sterling Bank's board of directors had held an emergency virtual meeting, permanently revoking Vanessa's credentials and begging federal regulators for corporate leniency. Her carefully curated empire of lies, built over a decade of social climbing, had completely collapsed in exactly 4 hours and 12 minutes. By the next morning, I discovered that cornered animals bite blindly. The raid had hit the bank. Vanessa and Bradley were detained, but their defense attorneys secured their temporary release pending formal charges. They were out on the streets completely desperate. Instead of accepting defeat, they decided to burn the forest down. They wanted to destroy my reputation before the government destroyed them. I was pouring coffee when my public relations director called my encrypted line. He sounded frantic. I instructed him to speak clearly. He told me to look at the local news. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and navigated to the city's most prominent digital news blog. The headline was plastered across the front page in massive letters. It read, "Unhinged military veteran terrorizes prominent banking family." I clicked the article and read the fabricated garbage they paid someone to publish. The story was a masterclass in manipulation. Vanessa and Bradley fed the reporter a completely twisted narrative. They claimed that I was a broke discharged soldier, suffering from violent, untreated post-traumatic stress disorder. The article stated that I had stormed into First Sterling Bank, violently assaulted the security staff, and demanded millions of dollars in a delusional extortion attempt. They painted Bradley as a wealthy, heroic patriarch who was simply trying to protect his terrified wife from her aggressive, estranged sister. They even included a tragic fabricated quote from Vanessa, claiming she was living in fear for her life because I was a highly trained killer who had lost my grip on reality. The smear campaign did not stop with the local blog. The digital fallout was immediate and aggressively toxic. My mother Loretta had taken the article and weaponized it across her entire social network. She posted the link directly to her public Facebook page, adding a long, tearful caption. She wrote about the heartbreak of raising a troubled daughter. She claimed she had prayed for my mental health for years, but that my military service had turned me into a violent monster. She asked her friends to pray for Vanessa and Bradley during this terrifying ordeal. Within 2 hours, Loretta had rallied her entire church congregation and the local community against me. The comment section was a cesspool of judgment and condemnation. Women who had known me since I was a child were leaving comments calling me a disgrace. They praised Loretta for her strength in dealing with such a toxic, dangerous daughter. They called for authorities to step in and protect Leo from my supposed insanity. My personal phone began to buzz with messages from distant relatives and former high school classmates calling me a failure, a thug, and a threat to society. They were trying to ostracize me. They wanted to socially isolate me, hoping the public pressure would force me to drop the federal investigation and surrender my son's trust fund to make the bad press go away. My public relations director was still on the line, breathing heavily. He told me that we needed to issue a massive cease and desist order immediately. He wanted to deploy our crisis management team to scrub the article from the internet, issue a counter-statement outlining my actual corporate status, and threaten the blog publisher with a catastrophic lawsuit. He was prepared to go to war to defend the pristine image of Aegis Cyber Defense. "Stand down," I ordered, taking a slow sip of my black coffee. My director paused, clearly confused. He reminded me that this kind of defamatory press could potentially harm our corporate relations if it reached our partners at the Department of Defense. He begged me to let him shut it down before the narrative spiraled completely out of our control. I smiled, staring at the horrible words my mother had written about me on the internet. "I do not want you to scrub a single word from that blog. I do not want you to issue a statement. I want you to let the fake news spread as far and wide as possible. Encourage the algorithm. Let them share it to every single group they can find." My director asked me why I would possibly want to amplify a smear campaign. "Because they are doing my job for me," I explained, leaning back in my office chair. "Vanessa Bradley and my mother are currently under federal investigation for financial fraud and elder abuse. They are desperate. By publishing these specific, measurable lies in a public forum, they are committing documented defamation. They are putting their malice in writing. I want them to feel confident. I want them to keep talking. I want them to dig a hole so deep that they can never climb out." I instructed my legal team to start taking high-resolution screenshots of every single article post and nasty comment my mother approved. I wanted every timestamp recorded and securely archived. They thought they were destroying my public image. In reality, they were simply handing me the exact ammunition I needed to make my impending defamation lawsuit completely airtight. I hung up the phone and looked out my window at the waking city. They wanted to play a public game. I was going to let them set the board, and then I was going to flip the entire table. My legal team arrived at my penthouse 1 hour later. We gathered around my large table, replacing coffee with stacks of digital files. Marcus, my lead counsel, projected the finalized legal documents directly onto the screen. We were dropping a federal legal bomb. I authorized a lawsuit against Vanessa Bradley and Loretta for defamation, financial fraud, and malicious harassment. We included every screenshot from the smear campaign, complete with digital timestamps and routing data. We added undeniable proof of Vanessa freezing my secure accounts. We attached the forged docs Bradley used to drain Loretta's retirement fund. The lawsuit demanded astronomical damages. It was designed to obliterate whatever resources they had left. "Process servers are ready," Colonel Marcus announced. "We have located all 3 targets. Vanessa and Bradley are meeting with a bail bondsman. Loretta is at her church, soaking up sympathy from her congregation. We can execute services simultaneously." "Do it," I commanded. "I want them to know exactly what kind of war they started." Across the city, the trap snapped shut. Vanessa and Bradley were handed thick envelopes in the middle of a crowded sidewalk. Vanessa screamed at the server. Bradley dropped his coffee cup. My mother received her summons during choir practice. The server walked down the aisle and handed her the stack of federal charges. Loretta fainted into the arms of the choir director. They thought they could destroy me with a fake article. Instead, they were handed a ticket to legal destruction. The subpoenas demanded their immediate appearance in court regarding defamation and the emergency custody injunction they filed. Bradley realized the magnitude of the lawsuit. He knew standard defense would fail against our digital evidence. He needed a miracle. He needed someone ruthless to bend the law. Using the last reserves of stolen money, Bradley hired Richard Vance. Richard was the most expensive, morally bankrupt family lawyer in the city. He was notorious for destroying his opponents through character assassination. He did not care about the truth. He only cared about winning. I received a briefing on Richard Vance later that afternoon. My analysts intercepted the metadata of their legal strategy sessions. Bradley and Vanessa spent hours in Richard's office crafting a fictitious narrative. They knew they could not fight the fraud charges directly. Their only hope was to discredit me as a witness and a mother. They planned to walk into the courtroom and attack my military record. They wanted to weaponize my 12 years of honorable service. They intended to present me as a dangerous, violent individual who suffered from psychological trauma. They were preparing to tell the judge that I was a threat to society, hoping to distract the court from their own massive financial crimes. They wanted the judge to focus entirely on my supposed mental instability. "They are going to play dirty, Colonel," Marcus warned me over a video call. "Richard Vance is going to try to provoke you on the stand. He wants you to lose your temper. He wants you to look like the angry woman they described in their fake article." "Let him try," I replied, my voice steady. "I have survived hostile interrogations in war zones. A man in a cheap suit asking insulting questions will not break my composure. We stick to our strategy. We let them dig their own graves." I disconnected the call and closed my laptop. The legal maneuvering and planning were finished for the day. Tomorrow we would walk into the federal courthouse and finish this battle. But tonight I needed to focus on the only thing that mattered in my life. I walked out of my office and found Leo sitting on the living room rug. He was building a complex fortress out of plastic blocks. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow across his peaceful face. I sat down on the rug beside him. I watched his small hands work with intense concentration. He placed a final blue block on top of the structure and smiled at me. "It is super strong, Mom," Leo said proudly. "Nothing can knock it down. It is beautiful, baby." I smiled, wrapping my arm around his shoulders. "You built a very strong fortress." I pulled him into my lap, resting my chin on his head. I breathed in the sweet scent of his shampoo. The world outside this penthouse was swirling with chaos, malice, and impending legal warfare. My sister and her husband were plotting my downfall. My mother was praying for my destruction. But inside these walls there was only peace. There was only unconditional love. "Leo, I need you to know something important," I said softly, looking into his eyes. "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. Your father loved you so much, and I love you more than words can say. There are some people trying to be mean to us right now. They are trying to cause trouble because they are unhappy with their lives." Leo frowned slightly, his brow furrowing. "Like Aunt Vanessa." "Yes, exactly like Aunt Vanessa," I confirmed, gently rubbing his back. "But you never have to be scared. I am always going to protect you. I have built a very strong fortress around us, just like your blocks. The people who hurt us will never be able to touch us again. They will never be allowed to come near you. Tomorrow I am going to make sure they are gone for good." Leo hugged me tightly, burying his face in my sweater. "I know you will protect me, Mom. You are the toughest person in the whole world." I held my son close as the sun slowly set over the city skyline. Tomorrow I would step into a courtroom and face the people who shared my blood but wished for my demise. Tomorrow the storm would finally break. But tonight, I simply held my child, finding strength in the absolute certainty of our victory. The night before the federal hearing, sleep entirely evaded me. I stood on the balcony of my penthouse at 4 in the morning, the cold wind whipping my hair, watching the city below slowly wake up. This was the city where I had been systematically broken down as a child, and today it would be the city where I broke my chains forever. I went into the kitchen and brewed a pot of black coffee, my mind meticulously reviewing every single piece of digital evidence we were about to submit. At 6 o'clock, Marcus arrived carrying 2 heavy leather briefcases. He didn't offer a cheerful greeting. He understood the immense gravity of what we were about to execute. "Are you ready for this, Colonel?" he asked quietly, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Once we submit these fraud dossiers to the judge, there is no turning back. Your mother will lose her home. Your sister will go to federal prison. The biological family you knew will be effectively erased. I looked at the closed door of Leo's bedroom. I thought of the torn cashier's check resting in a plastic evidence bag. They erased themselves the moment they viewed my son as collateral damage for their debts. I replied, my voice steady and cold as steel. We dropped the hammer, Marcus. Absolutely no mercy. The morning sun glared off the polished marble steps of the federal courthouse. I walked through the heavy double doors with my lead counsel, Marcus, right beside me. I wore a tailored navy blue suit, my hair pulled back perfectly. I projected absolute calm. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was already suffocating. Vanessa Bradley and my mother Loretta sat at the opposing table. They looked like a picture-perfect family dressed in conservative pastel colors to appear soft and innocent. Bradley had hired Richard Vance, a defense attorney notorious for his ruthless and unethical tactics in family court. Richard Vance was currently whispering to Bradley, adjusting his expensive tie. They did not look like people facing federal fraud charges. They looked like predators preparing for a slaughter. The bailiff announced the arrival of Judge Harrison, a stern-looking man with decades of experience on the bench. We all stood as he took his seat. Judge Harrison banged his wooden gavel, signaling the commencement of the emergency custody injunction and the preliminary defamation hearing. He looked down at the massive stack of files in front of him, adjusting his reading glasses. We are here today to address the emergency custody petition filed by Bradley and Vanessa against Zoya Washington. Judge Harrison stated, his voice echoing in the large room. The petitioners claim that the respondent poses an immediate physical and psychological threat to her minor child. Mr. Vance, you may proceed with your opening argument. Richard Vance stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He walked slowly toward the center of the courtroom, making sure all eyes were on him. He pointed a dramatic finger directly at me. Your Honor, the woman sitting before you is not a fit mother. Richard Vance, dripping with rehearsed outrage. Zoya Washington is a highly trained, discharged military operative. She has spent 12 years in active combat zones. She has been conditioned to respond to stress with extreme, unhinged violence. We will prove today that she suffers from severe and untreated psychological trauma. Just 3 days ago, she walked into a public financial institution, verbally assaulted the staff, and physically threatened armed security guards in front of her terrified 7-year-old son. She is a ticking time bomb, Your Honor. My clients are simply trying to rescue an innocent child before a tragedy occurs. I sat perfectly still. I did not glare. I did not react. Marcus scribbled a quick note on his yellow legal pad, sliding it toward me. Let him talk, the note read. I nodded slightly. Richard Vance paced back and forth, building his fabricated narrative. He painted Bradley and Vanessa as wealthy, stable, and deeply concerned family members. He conveniently glossed over the fact that they were completely bankrupt. He requested to call their primary character witness to the stand. Judge Harrison granted the request. I call Loretta Washington to the stand, Richard Vance announced. My mother stood up slowly from her chair. She wore a simple beige dress, clutching a tissue in her trembling hands. She walked to the witness box, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. She sat down looking frail and heartbroken. It was an incredible theatrical performance. If I did not know the monster hiding behind those tears, I might have actually believed her act. Mrs. Washington, thank you for being here today. Richard Vance began, using a soft and sympathetic tone. Can you please tell the court about your relationship with your daughter Zoya? Loretta dabbed her dry eyes with the tissue. She looked directly at the judge, her lower lip quivering. It breaks my heart to be here today, Your Honor. I love my daughter. I raised her with good Christian values. But the military changed her. When she came back from her deployments, she was angry. She was always so aggressive. I tried to help her, but she refused to seek professional counseling. Did you witness her behavior firsthand? Richard Vance prompted, leading her perfectly. Yes, I did, Loretta cried, letting a single tear fall down her cheek. She isolates my grandson. She screams at him constantly. Just last week, she came to my house and violently threatened me. She said she was going to destroy our entire family. I fear for my grandson's life every single day. I lie awake at night praying that he survives living in her home. She is deeply unstable. She is a danger to society, and she is a massive danger to that sweet little boy. Every word she spoke was a calculated, deliberate lie. She was committing blatant perjury under federal oath. She was willing to destroy my entire life, steal my child, and send me to a psychiatric facility just to help Vanessa get her hands on Leo's $8 million survivor trust fund. She was sacrificing me to save the golden child from bankruptcy. I glanced over at the opposing table. Vanessa and Bradley were sitting close together. Vanessa caught my eye. She tilted her head slightly and smiled. It was a wicked, triumphant smirk. Bradley squeezed her hand, leaning back in his chair with an arrogant posture. They genuinely believed they had won. They thought Loretta's crocodile tears had successfully swayed the judge to grant them emergency custody of Leo. They thought my silence was a sign of absolute defeat. "Thank you, Mrs. Washington. You are very brave for coming forward to protect your grandson," Richard Vance said, turning back to the judge. "Your Honor, the testimony speaks for itself. We request that custody be transferred to my clients immediately, pending a full psychological evaluation of the respondent. No further questions for this witness." Richard Vance returned to his seat, looking proud of himself. Loretta remained in the witness box, weeping into her tissue. Judge Harrison looked over his glasses, his expression unreadable. He turned his attention to our side of the courtroom. "Does the defense wish to cross-examine the witness?" Judge Harrison asked. Marcus stood up from our table, casually buttoning his suit jacket. He looked at my mother, who was still gripping her damp tissue in the witness box, waiting for a brutal interrogation. She had braced herself to cry harder, preparing to play the ultimate victim during her cross-examination. "The defense has no questions for this witness, Your Honor," Marcus stated clearly. Loretta blinked in confusion. Richard Vance frowned, leaning forward in his expensive leather chair. They had anticipated a prolonged emotional shouting match to make me look hostile and out of control. By refusing to engage with her performance, we starved them of the theatrical drama they desperately needed to prove their case. "Very well," Judge Harrison said, looking slightly surprised by our swift dismissal. "You may step down, Mrs. Washington. Does the defense wish to call their first witness?" My mother slowly stood up and walked back to the petitioner's table, shooting me a highly nervous glance. She realized her theatrical performance had landed in an absolute void. She took her seat next to Vanessa, wiping away tears that had suddenly stopped flowing. "We do, Your Honor," Marcus announced, stepping directly into the center aisle of the courtroom. "The defense calls General David Garrison to the stand." The heavy wooden doors at the back of the federal courtroom swung open. The armed bailiff stepped aside immediately. A tall, broad-shouldered man walked through the threshold. He wore the immaculate, highly decorated dress uniform of the United States Armed Forces. 4 gleaming silver stars rested proudly on his shoulders. Rows of commendations medals of absolute valor and combat ribbons covered his chest. General Garrison commanded the atmosphere of the room without speaking a single word. Every person in the gallery instinctively sat up straighter. Judge Harrison actually leaned back in his high-backed leather chair, his eyes widening in absolute awe. It was incredibly rare for a 4-star general to appear in a civilian family court hearing. The sheer authority radiating from the man sucked the oxygen right out of the room. Vanessa grabbed Bradley by the forearm. Her meticulously manicured fingernails dug sharply into his expensive suit sleeve. Bradley stared at the general with his mouth hanging wide open. His rigid posture of wealthy entitlement melted into instant visible panic. General Garrison marched down the center aisle with measured, precise steps. His polished boots echoed sharply against the hardwood floor. He walked right past my mother, who shrank back into her chair. He approached the witness box, raised his right hand, and swore the federal oath with a booming, resonant voice. He sat down, folding his hands together, and looked directly at Richard Vance. The aggressive defense attorney was already sweating profusely. "General Garrison, thank you for your presence today." Marcus began, standing respectfully near the wooden podium. "Could you please state your current position for the record?" "I serve as the commanding officer of the United States Cyber Command." General Garrison replied, his voice authoritative and incredibly crisp. "I oversee global digital defense operations and strategic threat neutralization for the Department of Defense." "Thank you, General," Marcus continued. "And how long have you known the respondent, Zoya Washington?" "I have known her for exactly 14 years. the general answered, looking over at me with profound respect. I was her commanding officer during her last 3 combat deployments. I also directly sponsored her current top-secret security clearance when she transitioned into the private contracting sector. Marcus walked closer to the jury box, ensuring his voice carried. General Garrison opposing counsel has just presented a narrative claiming that my client is dangerously unhinged. They have stated under oath that she suffers from severe, untreated psychological trauma that makes her a violent threat to society and an unfit mother. Can you speak to her psychological stability? General Garrison let out a short, dismissive scoff. He glared intensely at Richard Vance, who quickly looked down at his legal pad. That claim is not only absurd, it is factually and federally incorrect, the general stated firmly. Zoya Washington underwent the most rigorous, exhaustive psychological evaluations known to the United States military. She scored in the top 1% for emotional regulation, crisis management, and psychological resilience. You do not hand the keys to the national cyber defense infrastructure to someone who is unstable. Could you elaborate on her current responsibilities, General? Marcus asked. She currently holds a Tier 1 federal security clearance. General Garrison explained, his intense gaze sweeping across the quiet courtroom. She manages a $500 million defense contract. She is personally responsible for securing the financial and digital infrastructure of this nation. If she had even a minor psychological episode, my department would know about it instantly. She is the most disciplined, level-headed, and fiercely protective individual I have ever had the honor of serving alongside. Any suggestion that she poses a threat to her own child is an insult to her flawless record of protecting this entire country. Judge Harrison nodded slowly, absorbing every single word. He looked at me with a newfound expression of profound reverence. The false narrative of the broken, aggressive veteran had been completely obliterated. Richard Vance pulled a white handkerchief from his jacket pocket. He aggressively wiped the mounting sweat from his forehead. His entire legal strategy relied on characterizing me as a dangerous, volatile woman. That strategy was currently burning to the ground in front of a mesmerized federal judge. General, what is your professional opinion of Zoya Washington's character? Marcus asked, delivering the final necessary blow. She is a decorated hero, General Garrison declared loudly. She sacrificed her own safety to ensure the survival of her team. She leads with compassion, she operates with flawless integrity, and she possesses a moral compass that is entirely incorruptible. I would trust her with my own life. I trust her with the security of the United States. She is an exceptional mother who prioritizes her son above absolutely everything else. Marcus turned to Richard Vance and smiled coldly. No further questions for this witness, Your Honor. Your witness, Counselor. Richard Vance stood up on shaky legs. He looked at the 4-star general who was currently staring him down like a hostile target. The defense attorney swallowed hard. He knew that attempting to cross-examine a highly decorated military leader and accuse him of lying would instantly enrage the presiding judge. He had absolutely nothing. His fabricated narrative had hit a titanium wall. No questions, Your Honor, Richard Vance mumbled, collapsing back into his chair. Bradley grabbed his attorney by the shoulder, whispering furiously, "What are you doing? Do something right now, attack her record." "Are you insane?" Richard Vance hissed back through clenched teeth. "That is a 4-star general. He just testified that she holds the keys to the national defense grid. You told me she was a broke, discharged failure. You blatantly lied to me, Bradley. We are completely exposed." Vanessa pressed her hands against her cheeks, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. The smug, triumphant smirk she wore just 10 minutes ago had vanished entirely. She looked at her mother, Loretta, who was staring blankly at the floor. They had walked into a federal courtroom expecting an easy slaughter. They had no idea they were walking into a perfectly orchestrated ambush. They had severely underestimated who they were fighting against, and the trap was about to snap shut. I stood up from my seat at the defense table, adjusting the collar of my navy blue suit. The courtroom was pin-drop quiet. Marcus turned to the judge and officially called me to the witness stand. I walked down the center aisle with measured, deliberate steps. I carried nothing but my encrypted federal tablet. I stepped into the wooden witness box, raised my right hand, and swore the oath to tell the whole truth. I sat down and looked directly at Vanessa. She was clutching her designer purse, her face completely drained of color. Bradley was staring at the floor, his arrogant posture entirely shattered by the four-star general who had just dismantled his entire fabricated narrative. They thought the worst was over. They had absolutely no idea that I was just getting started. Colonel Washington, thank you for your patience today. Marcus began, stepping up to the wooden podium. Opposing counsel has made several severe allegations regarding your financial stability and your ability to care for your son. They claim you are entirely broke. They claim you caused a violent disturbance at First Sterling Bank. Could you please clarify what actually occurred on that specific day? I nodded, resting my hands on the wooden rail. I went to the bank to deposit a $5 million federal check for an escrow account related to a Department of Defense contract. Vanessa deliberately tore that federal deposit in half, following her blatant destruction of government property. I utilized my security clearance to order an immediate comprehensive federal audit of her specific branch. My private cyber division, operating under federal authority, seized the bank servers that same afternoon. Richard Vance jumped up from his chair, his face red with absolute panic. Objection, Your Honor. This has absolutely nothing to do with the custody of the minor child. This is a family court hearing, not a federal banking tribunal. Overruled, Judge Harrison barked, slamming his wooden gavel. The petitioners made the respondents' financial status and behavior at the bank a central pillar of their custody petition. I want to hear exactly what this federal audit uncovered. Proceed, Colonel. I unlocked my tablet and wirelessly connected it to the large monitors mounted on the courtroom walls. When the federal cyber team audited the branch, they discovered exactly why Vanessa and Bradley filed this emergency custody injunction. It was never about my son's welfare. It was a desperate attempt to gain control of his $8 million survivor trust fund because they are facing catastrophic financial ruin. Furthermore, they attempted to manufacture proof of my supposed instability. I swiped the smooth screen. A highly detailed digital log appeared on the bright monitors. The morning after the bank incident, I attempted to purchase groceries. My personal civilian accounts were completely frozen. Opposing counsel claims this proves I am destitute. However, the federal audit reveals the exact origin of that freeze. At midnight, Vanessa used her vice president executive clearance to illegally access my social security number. She maliciously placed a hard freeze on all of my assets, attempting to starve me out and create a documented financial crisis for this very hearing. Judge Harrison leaned forward, his eyes narrowing intensely at Vanessa. She illegally froze a federal contractor's assets using bank credentials. Yes, Your Honor, I confirmed clearly. And because my personal accounts are linked to my military clearance, her unauthorized intrusion triggered a Tier 1 federal cyber terrorism alert. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is currently preparing a massive indictment against her for cyber crimes. Vanessa gasped loudly. She covered her mouth with both hands, tears of pure terror welling in her eyes. Bradley pushed his chair away from her, trying to physically distance himself from his wife's impending federal charges. But the audit did not stop with my accounts. I continued, my voice echoing in the silent room. When the Department of Defense cyber team investigated Vanessa's executive terminal, they uncovered a massive systematic network of financial fraud. Bradley's old money trust fund went bankrupt 2 years ago. To cover his massive secret gambling debts and their 3 hidden residential mortgages, Vanessa has been actively embezzling money. I swiped my tablet again. Redacted bank statements flooded the screens. Vanessa targeted the most vulnerable clients at First Sterling Bank. She systematically drained the savings accounts of elderly individuals who lacked the technological literacy to monitor their online banking. She forged electronic signatures, authorized fraudulent wire transfers, and funneled millions of dollars into offshore shell companies controlled by Bradley. The courtroom erupted into shocked whispers. Richard Vance looked like he was about to pass out. He had walked into this courtroom expecting an easy victory against a broken veteran. Now he was sitting next to 2 individuals about to be arrested for grand larceny and federal wire fraud. Judge Harrison slammed his gavel repeatedly, demanding absolute order in his courtroom. Order! Judge Harrison shouted, his face turning red with righteous fury. Colonel Washington, are you submitting these official audit findings into the record? I am, Your Honor. I replied, maintaining my unshakable composure. But there is one final piece of evidence the court must see to understand the absolute depravity of the petitioners. I looked directly at my mother. Loretta was sitting rigidly at the table, her hands clutching her purse. She had happily committed perjury to help Vanessa steal my son. She believed Vanessa was the perfect, wealthy, golden child. It was time to show her the true cost of her blind favoritism. Vanessa ran out of elderly clients to steal from, I stated, projecting the final financial document onto the courtroom screens. The gambling debts kept piling up and the bank was threatening foreclosure on their estate. She needed a massive injection of liquid cash immediately, so she executed a fraudulent power of attorney and drained one final account. I pointed a steady finger at the screen. That specific account number belongs to Loretta Washington. Vanessa completely drained our mother's life savings. The heavy silence in the federal courtroom shattered the moment the reality of the projected documents finally registered in my mother's mind. Loretta stared blankly at the massive digital screens, her eyes darting back and forth across the highlighted transaction records. She read the dates. She read the withdrawal amounts. She saw the final balance of $412 displayed in bright red text. Her hands, which had been gripping her leather purse with such righteous indignation just moments before, began to tremble violently. The purse slipped from her fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a dull thud. "Vanessa," Loretta whispered. Her voice was thin and raspy, stripped of all its usual arrogant authority. "Vanessa, what is this? Tell me this is a mistake. Tell me your sister is manipulating the bank records." Vanessa could not even look at our mother. She shrank back into her chair, her perfectly manicured hands covering her face as silent tears streamed down her cheeks. Her silence was a profound, undeniable confession. Loretta slowly stood up from the petitioner's table. The frail, victimized grandmother act she had performed for the judge completely evaporated. Her face contorted into a mask of absolute, unhinged rage. She lunged toward her golden child, grabbing Vanessa by the shoulder of her expensive designer blazer. "You stole my money!" Loretta screamed, her voice echoing wildly off the high ceilings of the courtroom. "You drained my entire retirement fund. I gave you everything. I favored you, your entire life. I just lied under a federal oath for you. I committed perjury to help you steal Zoya's child and you bankrupt me." Vanessa batted our mother's hands away, her own panic transforming into vicious defense. "I had to do it. We were going to lose the house. Mom Bradley's trust fund was gone. We owed the bank millions. You always told me to maintain our family image no matter what the cost. I was protecting the legacy you are so obsessed with. You stole my life savings to pay for your husband's secret gambling addictions," Loretta roared, spittle flying from her lips as she pointed a shaking finger at Bradley. "You left me with nothing. You are a thief and a parasite." Bradley stood up so fast his heavy wooden chair tipped over backward, crashing loudly onto the floor. He raised both of his hands in the air, physically backing away from his wife and his mother-in-law. He looked directly at Judge Harrison, his eyes wide with desperate cowardice. The wealthy, entitled patriarch facade dissolved entirely, leaving behind a pathetic, terrified fraud. "Your Honor, I had absolutely no idea," Bradley shouted, his voice cracking. "I am completely innocent in this matter. I did not know my wife was embezzling funds from the bank. I did not know she forged her mother's signature on a power of attorney. Vanessa handles all of our household finances. She manages all the accounts. She kept the severity of our debt hidden from me. I am a victim of her financial deception." Vanessa gasped loudly. The color completely drained from her face as she stared at the man she had sacrificed her entire family for. She had stolen millions, risked federal prison, and alienated her sister just to keep his luxurious lifestyle afloat. Now, at the very first sign of genuine danger, he was tossing her directly into the fire to save his own skin. "Bradley, how could you say that?" Vanessa shrieked, her voice breaking with absolute hysteria. "We planned this together. You told me to drain the accounts. You told me to file this custody petition so we could take Leo's trust fund. You hired Richard Vance with my mother's stolen money." "That is a complete lie," Bradley yelled back, pointing an accusatory finger at his wife. "Your Honor, she is a pathological liar and a convicted embezzler. She is trying to drag me down with her. I want to officially separate my legal counsel from my wife right now." I had nothing to do with stealing that elderly woman's retirement money, and I had nothing to do with stealing from those bank clients. Richard Vance, the aggressively expensive defense attorney, packed his legal pads into his leather briefcase with rapid, frantic movements. He wanted nothing to do with a married couple loudly confessing to multiple federal felonies on the official court record. He looked like a man trying to escape a burning building. "Order in my courtroom!" Judge Harrison roared. He struck his heavy wooden gavel against the sounding block with deafening force. The sharp cracking sound sliced through the chaotic screaming match instantly. "I demand absolute silence this very second." Loretta, Vanessa, and Bradley froze. They turned toward the bench, finally realizing the massive legal destruction they had just brought upon themselves. Judge Harrison stood up. He leaned over his high desk, his face trembling with unbridled fury. He pointed his gavel directly at the opposing table. "I have presided over this federal family court for 22 years. Judge Harrison bellowed, his voice shaking the walls. "I have never witnessed such a despicable, malicious, and thoroughly documented abuse of the judicial system. You filed an emergency injunction based entirely on fabricated lies. You intentionally weaponized Child Protective Services to steal a grieving child survivor benefits. You froze a decorated military contractor's banking accounts. And you, Mrs. Washington, sat in my witness box and committed blatant perjury to assist these vile criminals." Loretta sobbed, covering her mouth. "Your Honor, I did not know they stole my savings." "Ignorance of their fraud does not excuse your deliberate perjury," Judge Harrison snapped brutally. "This court finds the petitioners completely unfit. This emergency custody injunction is hereby dismissed with extreme prejudice. But we are not finished here, not even close. Given the staggering digital evidence of massive federal wire fraud and criminal embezzlement presented before me today, I am taking immediate decisive action to protect the public interest." Bailiffs locked the doors. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom slammed shut with a resounding thud. The metallic clack of the deadbolts locking echoed like a gunshot through the terrifying silence. Two armed bailiffs immediately took up positions in front of the exits. Another pair of officers moved swiftly down the center aisle, their hands resting cautiously on their duty belts. Loretta shrank back into her seat, pulling her knees up to her chest, as if trying to disappear entirely. "Vanessa and Bradley," Judge Harrison commanded, his voice slicing through the thick tension. "Based on the undeniable digital evidence submitted to this court, I am ordering your immediate detainment. You are both being held in contempt of court for egregious perjury. Furthermore, I am holding you under suspicion of grand larceny, criminal embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud against the most vulnerable citizens of this state." Vanessa let out a blood-curdling scream. She scrambled backward, knocking her wooden chair over as a bailiff approached her. "No, you cannot do this. I am a vice president at First Sterling Bank. I have a pristine reputation. I am a mother." "You are a criminal," Judge Harrison corrected her sharply. "And your bank terminated your employment the moment the Federal Cyber Division seized your servers this morning. Put your hands behind your back." The bailiff grabbed Vanessa by the arm, forcing her wrists together. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs snapping shut resonated through the room. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. For 35 years she had used her social status to make me feel small. Now she was wearing stainless steel bracelets stripped of every single ounce of her fabricated dignity. "Bradley, do something!" Vanessa shrieked, struggling against the bailiff's firm grip. Her perfectly styled hair fell into her face, ruined by her panicked tears. "Call your family. Call the trust lawyers. You promised me we would be safe. You promised me this would work. Tell them to let me go right now." Bradley did not answer her. He could not even look at his wife. He was standing near the defense table, his hands trembling violently. Tears streamed down his pale cheeks, ruining his arrogant, wealthy facade. He was sobbing like a terrified child. Before Bradley could muster a pathetic excuse, the side door near the judge's bench swung open. Three men wearing tactical vests with the letters FBI printed in bold yellow font stepped into the courtroom. They bypassed the local bailiffs and marched directly toward Bradley. The lead federal agent held up a warrant. "Bradley, you are being placed under federal arrest for interstate wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion." We have tracked the offshore accounts you used to hide stolen funds. Your assets have been seized by the federal government. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Bradley collapsed onto his knees. He wept openly, bowing his head as the federal marshals pulled his arms behind him. The handcuffs clicked into place. The wealthy white savior, the man who had ordered bank guards to assault me in front of my 7-year-old son, was now crying on the floor of a federal courthouse. "Help me," Bradley begged, looking up at Richard Vance, his expensive defense attorney. "You have to get me bail. You have to fix this." Richard Vance simply picked up his leather briefcase and walked completely away from the defense table. He did not utter a single word to his former client. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. Vanessa screamed again, thrashing against the bailiff as she watched her husband get dragged to his feet by the federal marshals. "You used me. You made me steal that money. You ruined my life." "You ruined your own life, Vanessa," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the chaotic room. "You chose greed over your own family. You dug this grave with your own 2 hands." Judge Harrison banged his gavel to restore order as the federal marshals escorted a sobbing Bradley out through the side doors. The local bailiffs forced Vanessa to sit back down in a chair, her hands cuffed securely behind her back. Loretta remained frozen at the table, watching the total destruction of her beloved golden child. "Colonel Washington," Judge Harrison said, his tone softening considerably as he addressed me, "this court extends its deepest apologies for the horrific ordeal you and your son have been put through. The malicious weaponization of the judicial system by these petitioners is truly unprecedented. It is my duty to ensure that they can never threaten your family again." I stood up respectfully. "Thank you, Your Honor. My only priority is the absolute safety of my son." "And you shall have it," Judge Harrison declared, looking down at his official documents. "I am hereby granting a permanent lifetime restraining order against Vanessa Bradley and Loretta Washington. They are legally barred from coming within 1,000 feet of you, your son, your residence, or your place of business. Any violation of this order will result in immediate mandatory jail time." Loretta let out a sharp gasp, covering her mouth with her trembling hands. The reality of her situation was finally sinking in. She had lost her retirement fund, she was about to lose her house to foreclosure, and now she was legally banned from ever contacting the only daughter who actually had the financial means to truly help her. "Furthermore," Judge Harrison continued, his voice echoing with absolute finality, "given the severe emotional distress, the blatant defamation of character, and the malicious financial sabotage attempted against the respondent, I am awarding Colonel Washington massive punitive damages. The petitioners are ordered to pay $5 million in restitution. Since the petitioners' assets are currently subject to federal seizure, this court places a permanent lien against any future earnings, properties, or inheritances they may ever acquire. They are entirely and utterly ruined." He struck his wooden gavel hard. The sharp crack of the wooden gavel echoed with absolute finality. I picked up my encrypted tablet from the defense table and slid it into my briefcase. Marcus stood beside me, fastening his suit jacket. We simply nodded at each other, acknowledging a flawlessly executed legal operation. Federal marshals had hauled Bradley through the side doors. Bailiffs were dragging a sobbing Vanessa toward the temporary holding cells. Loretta remained paralyzed in her chair. She stared at the empty space where her golden child had been sitting. I turned my back and walked up the center aisle. The heavy oak doors swung open. We stepped into the expansive hallway of the federal building. I felt a tremendous weight lifting off my shoulders with every step I took. For my entire life, I had walked on eggshells to avoid upsetting a woman who despised my existence. I was finally done. We headed toward the grand staircase. "Zoya, please wait." The desperate voice bounced off the stone walls behind us. I did not break my stride. I continued walking down the wide marble staircase, keeping my posture perfectly straight. We pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out onto the concrete plaza. The sky overhead was a bruised, heavy gray. A cold rain had begun to fall, washing away the remnants of the morning sun. "Zoya, please, you have to stop and listen to me." Loretta burst through the doors behind us. She was stumbling in her low heels, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The rain instantly plastered her graying hair to her forehead. She did not look like the arrogant matriarch who had sat at the head of a mahogany dining table just 48 hours ago. She looked utterly destitute. I stopped walking. I turned around slowly, letting the cold rain hit my face. Marcus stepped to the side, giving me the space I needed to finish this battle on my own terms. Loretta threw herself across the wet concrete. Her knees hit the pavement with a sickening thud. She lunged forward and grabbed the hem of my waterproof trench coat with both of her trembling hands. Her knuckles were white from how hard she was gripping the dark fabric. "You have to help me," Loretta wailed, looking up as tears streamed down her cheeks. "You cannot just leave me here. Vanessa took everything. She stole my life savings. The bank is taking my house. I have nowhere to go. I have no money for food or a lawyer. You are a billionaire, Zoya. You have that massive penthouse. You have to let me move in with you. I am your mother." I looked down at the woman kneeling in the puddles at my feet. The rain washed away her makeup, leaving behind a pathetic stranger. I searched my heart for any lingering trace of sympathy. I searched for the scared little girl who used to crave this woman's affection, who cleaned the house flawlessly, just to get a single nod of approval that never came. I remembered the nights I cried myself to sleep because I was never enough. That little girl was gone. This woman's betrayal had completely forged my heart in iron. "You are not my mother," I stated. My voice was calm, steady, and entirely devoid of warmth. "You made that abundantly clear in the courtroom when you committed perjury to help criminals steal my child. You made that clear when you screamed that I was just the product of an affair. You made that clear every single day for 34 years when you treated me like a stray dog in your pristine house." "I was wrong," Loretta shrieked, clutching my coat tighter, burying her wet face against my knees. "I made a terrible mistake. I was blinded by Bradley's money. I thought Vanessa was securing our legacy. I did not know they were criminals. I raised you, Zoya. I kept you when I did not have to. Please find it in your heart to forgive me. I am begging you on my hands and knees. Do not let me die on the streets." Her dramatic apologies were entirely hollow. She was not truly sorry for how she treated me. She was only sorry that her chosen champions had lost the war. She was only apologizing because the Golden Child's bank accounts were federally seized and my accounts were full. I reached down with slow, deliberate movements. I firmly grabbed Loretta's wet wrists. I peeled her trembling fingers off my coat one by one. I stepped back, removing myself completely from her desperate grasp. She slumped forward, her empty hands splashing into a cold puddle on the pavement. "You chose your legacy, Loretta," I said, looking down at her shivering form with absolute indifference. "You placed all of your bets on Vanessa. You fed her your money, your loyalty, and your soul. You wanted to live in her elite world. Now you get to live in the exact reality she created for you." Loretta let out a gut-wrenching sob, reaching her empty hands out toward my boots. "Please, I have absolutely no one else." "That is factually incorrect," I replied, my tone dropping to a chilling whisper. "Your real daughter is waiting for you in a holding cell. I highly suggest you go keep her company." I turned my back on her for the final time. I walked toward the sleek black armored vehicle waiting at the curb. My private security detail opened the heavy passenger door for me. I stepped inside the warm, quiet interior of the vehicle. Marcus slid into the front passenger seat. As the heavy armored door shut, with a solid, definitive click, I looked out the tinted window. Loretta was still kneeling on the wet concrete of the courthouse plaza. She was rocking back and forth, wailing into her empty hands as the cold rain continued to pour down around her. Pedestrians walked past her, offering nothing but uncomfortable stares. She was entirely alone, trapped in the miserable, bankrupt existence she had actively chosen over me. "Take us home," I instructed my driver, keeping my head held high. The powerful engine roared to life. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, leaving the imposing federal courthouse and the toxic wreckage of my past far behind. I pulled my mobile phone from my pocket and opened a digital picture of Leo smiling brightly. A profound, overwhelming sense of absolute peace washed over my entire being. The brutal war was officially over. We were finally free. The armored vehicle glided through the city streets, carrying us back to where this ordeal had begun. We pulled up to the towering glass facade of First Sterling Bank. It had only been a few days since I was ambushed in that lobby and humiliated. Today the reception was entirely different. Marcus and I stepped out of the vehicle and walked through the revolving glass doors. The armed security guards who had previously cornered me now stood at strict attention, lowering their heads respectfully. Mr. Sterling was waiting for us in the center of the marble floor wearing a sharp charcoal suit. "Welcome back, Colonel Washington." Mr. Sterling greeted me warmly, extending his right hand. "I have prepared the executive boardroom for our meeting. We have a considerable amount of administrative cleanup to finalize this morning." I shook his hand and followed him to the private elevator. We rode up to the top floor in comfortable silence. The doors opened to reveal a massive sunlit boardroom overlooking the financial district. Mr. Sterling directed me to the head of the long table where senior bank executives stood waiting. "Let us begin with the court-ordered financial restitution," Mr. Sterling announced, taking a seat beside Marcus. "We received the federal mandate from Judge Harrison 20 minutes ago. The $5 million punitive damage award has been fully processed. Since the petitioner's assets were seized, the bank liquidated their remaining portfolios and initiated the transfer." I watched the large projection screen on the wall as a senior bank analyst brought up my secure financial dashboard. The bright green numbers verified the successful transfer. The malicious financial strike they had attempted against me was completely reversed, permanently replaced by a massive influx of their own squandered stolen wealth. "Furthermore," Mr. Sterling continued, "all of your personal accounts have been fully restored. We have implemented a new highly restricted access protocol across the board. Your portfolio is now securely locked behind an impenetrable biometric firewall. No executive at any branch will ever be able to execute an unauthorized override on your private profile again. Your Department of Defense security clearance link remains intact." "I appreciate your diligence, Mr. Sterling," I said, carefully reviewing the detailed digital confirmations on my secure tablet. "Now I need an official recorded update regarding the specific individual who originally initiated the unauthorized freeze." Mr. Sterling's expression hardened into pure professional disgust. "Vanessa has been officially terminated from First Sterling Bank effective immediately. Our internal financial investigators spent the weekend combing through her executive terminal alongside your private cyber division. The depth of her criminal embezzlement was absolutely staggering. We have permanently blacklisted her from the entire international financial industry. She will never work in wealth management again." Marcus leaned forward, reviewing a document from his leather briefcase. "The federal prosecutors reached out to my law office today. Given the severe cyber terrorism alert she intentionally triggered, combined with the interstate wire fraud and grand larceny charges, the Department of Justice is not offering a plea deal. They are pursuing maximum sentencing. Vanessa is facing up to 20 years. I absorbed the information without a single ounce of lingering pity. Vanessa had built her entire identity around her corporate title and her fabricated superiority. She willingly destroyed innocent elderly clients and bankrupted her own mother just to maintain that fragile illusion. Now she was a disgraced unemployed felon staring down 2 brutal decades behind iron bars. Her corner office has been completely cleared out," Mr. Sterling added quietly, folding his hands. "Her personal belongings were boxed up by armed security and immediately handed over to the federal marshals to be processed for criminal evidence. The bank is fully cooperating with the Federal Bureau of Investigation to rapidly restore the funds she stole from elderly clients. Make sure those vulnerable victims are made whole immediately," I instructed, my firm tone, leaving absolutely no room for negotiation. "They will be fully reimbursed by the end of the business day," he promised without hesitation. "Now, Colonel, I believe you had one final piece of vital business you wish to conduct personally before we conclude." I nodded, pulling a thick blue folder from my briefcase. This was the most important task of the day. I was not leaving this building until my son's future was completely fortified against any potential threat. "I need to restructure my late husband's military survivor benefits," I stated, placing the documents on the table. "Vanessa and Bradley targeted Leo because his $8 million trust fund was vulnerable to family court manipulation. I am shutting that door permanently." Mr. Sterling summoned his top corporate trust attorney to the table. For the next hour, we meticulously crafted a new ironclad financial fortress for my son. I installed multiple layers of strict fiduciary oversight, requiring unanimous approval from a board of independent federal trustees. Add a specific unalterable exclusion clause. I ordered the attorney pointing to the beneficiary section of the document. I want it explicitly stated in the binding legal framework. No blood relative from my maternal lineage, including Loretta Washington and Vanessa Washington, shall ever be granted legal access, guardianship, or financial control over this specific trust under any circumstances whatsoever. Even in the event of my sudden death, they are legally barred from claiming a single cent. The attorney typed rapidly, embedding the strict legal language directly into the trust charter. It is officially done, Colonel. The trust is completely bulletproof. Your son's legacy is entirely isolated from your extended family. I picked up the gold pen provided by Mr. Sterling and signed my name on the final line of the document. The ink dried quickly on the parchment paper. I slid the paperwork back across the mahogany table. The $8 million my heroic husband had left behind for his only child was finally safe. The predators who shared my bloodline would never be able to touch his inheritance. The morning after I secured my son's trust fund, the city woke to a media firestorm. I sat at my kitchen island, sipping black coffee, as my public relations director briefed me over a secure video call. The fabricated narrative Vanessa and Bradley desperately tried to plant in the local news blog was obliterated. Major news networks picked up the real story overnight. The headlines across national television broadcasts were brutal. They did not hold back a single detail. Investigative journalists acquired the unsealed federal court records. They broadcasted the exact dollar amounts Vanessa stole from vulnerable elderly bank clients. They showed footage of the federal raid on First Sterling Bank. They published details of the forged power of attorney used to bankrupt my mother. Vanessa's tear-streaked mugshot was plastered across morning broadcasts. She instantly became the ultimate face of corporate greed and familial betrayal. The public backlash was catastrophic. The community members who eagerly condemned me days prior were now deleting their comments in absolute shame. The swiftness of their social execution was breathtaking. For decades, Loretta and Vanessa had operated solely on the currency of public perception. They worshipped at the altar of country club memberships and high society galas. By noon that day, the prestigious Oakwood Country Club released a public statement permanently revoking Vanessa and Bradley's membership, citing severe breaches of ethical conduct. But the most devastating blow came from Loretta's beloved church congregation. The very same women who had left vicious comments calling me a monster just days ago were now scrambling to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of Loretta's perjury. The church's board of deacons held an emergency vote and officially requested that Loretta no longer attend Sunday services, fearing her presence would attract unwanted media attention and federal scrutiny to their own donation records. In a matter of hours, the elite social circles they had sacrificed my childhood and their own morality to climb into had violently spat them out. Their phones stopped ringing. Their prestigious invitations dried up. They were officially untouchable, reduced to complete pariahs in the very community they had so desperately tried to impress. It was the most poetic, brutal justice imaginable. They were finally experiencing the exact isolation and rejection they had forced upon me for 34 years. Bradley's situation was somehow even worse. His affluent status-obsessed family watched their precious reputation go up in flames on television, desperate to salvage their social standing. His parents released a ruthless public statement through their corporate attorneys. They officially disowned Bradley. They declared they severed all financial and personal ties with him years ago. They publicly condemned his criminal actions and stated they would not contribute a single penny to his federal legal defense fund. Bradley was abandoned by the very people he destroyed his life to impress. He was sitting in a federal holding cell, completely broke, waiting for a public defender to take his case. The swift destruction of their arrogant facade was a profound lesson in natural consequences. They dug their own graves, and the media was throwing the dirt over them. With the legal and public warfare finally concluded, I needed to address the most important emotional task of this journey. I dressed Leo in a warm wool coat, and we drove to the National Military Cemetery on the quiet outskirts of the city. The sprawling grounds were incredibly peaceful. Rows of pristine white marble headstones stretched endlessly across the manicured green hills. The crisp autumn air carried a sense of profound reverence and absolute stillness. We walked hand in hand down the paved pathway until we reached the section dedicated to fallen Special Operations personnel. We stopped in front of a polished headstone bearing my late husband's name and military commendations. Leo knelt down on the soft grass. He carefully placed a brightly colored drawing of a strong fortress against the base of the white marble. He traced his fingers over the engraved letters, a quiet, brave smile on his face. I stood behind him, placing my hand gently on his small shoulder. I looked at the name carved into the stone, feeling a deep, overwhelming surge of love and absolute relief. "I kept my promise to you," I whispered to my husband, my voice steady and clear in the quiet cemetery. "I protected our boy. I built a fortress around him that nobody will ever break. The survivor benefits you earned with your ultimate sacrifice are completely locked down. The people who tried to hurt us are gone forever. The war is officially over. We are finally safe." A gentle breeze swept across the green hills, rustling the autumn leaves in the surrounding oak trees. It felt like a warm, comforting embrace. For the past 3 years, I carried the heavy burden of grief while simultaneously fighting off the toxic vultures who shared my bloodline. I constantly looked over my shoulder, waiting for the next malicious attack from my mother or my sister. Standing in that peaceful cemetery, I realized I did not have to carry that heavy armor anymore. The battle was won. I defended my family against all odds, and I emerged completely victorious. I wiped a single tear of joy from my cheek, took a deep breath of the crisp air, and gently pulled Leo to his feet. We walked back to the armored vehicle, leaving the ghosts of the past where they belonged. When we returned to the downtown penthouse, my private security detail was already coordinating the logistical transition. The federal cyber terrorism alert had triggered a massive shift in my corporate operations. Aegis Cyber Defense was rapidly expanding its federal contracts, and staying in this city no longer served my strategic or personal interests. This city held too many toxic memories. It was deeply tainted by the shadows of my mother's emotional abuse and my sister's relentless jealousy. I refused to let my son grow up in a place where he might accidentally encounter the collateral damage of their ruined lives. I walked into my home office and initiated a highly classified video conference with my executive leadership team. They appeared on the large digital monitors, waiting for my final directives. "We are officially executing the relocation protocol," I announced, projecting total authority. "I am moving our entire corporate headquarters to the new SecureTech campus in Northern Virginia. I want our primary operations situated directly adjacent to our partners at the Department of Defense. We will leave this city behind for good, initiate the real estate acquisitions for the executive staff, and begin the secure server migration immediately. We depart in 48 hours. My executive team nodded in unison, initiating relocation procedures. I ended the transmission and closed my laptop with a satisfying click. I walked out of my home office and looked around the luxurious penthouse. Boxes were already staged by my relocation team. I was packing up my life, but I was not running away. I was marching forward. I stripped away the heavy chains of toxic family loyalty. I proved unconditional love is a deliberate action, not a biological obligation. I was ready to build a new empire in a new city, surrounded only by the people who truly valued and respected my strength. 6 months after leaving that toxic city behind forever, I drove my armored vehicle through the heavily fortified gates of the brand new Aegis Cyber Defense headquarters in Northern Virginia. The sprawling high-tech corporate campus was an absolute masterpiece of modern architecture and federal security integration. Massive glass structures gleamed under the bright morning sun, completely surrounded by pristine landscaping and state-of-the-art defense perimeters. My private security detail cleared the primary checkpoint with a simple biometric scan, allowing my vehicle to glide smoothly up to the main executive entrance. I stepped out of the vehicle and took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. I was no longer the scapegoat of a broken family. I was a titan of industry standing on the steps of an empire I built with my own 2 hands. The Aegis Cyber Defense Campus was not just a corporate headquarters, it was an impenetrable fortress built on the ashes of my painful past and the solid foundation of Elias's heroic legacy. As I parked my vehicle, I looked at the massive bronze plaque mounted near the main employee entrance. It proudly bore the crest of Elias's Special Operations Unit, a silent, powerful dedication to the man who had first taught me what true, unconditional protection looked like. I had specifically designed this entire facility to be a sanctuary as much as a global defense firm. Beyond the biometric security gates and the subterranean server farms, there was a fully staffed state-of-the-art educational wing built explicitly for the children of my employees. Leo had his own dedicated learning suite there, surrounded by top-tier educators and the children of decorated veterans who truly understood the unique sacrifices of military families. He was no longer the isolated, grieving boy clinging to my coat in a hostile bank lobby. He was a thriving, confident child growing up in an environment where honor, duty, and intelligence were celebrated above all else. Every single inch of this magnificent campus was a physical testament to the fact that I had not just survived the toxicity of my bloodline, I had completely outgrown it, creating a brilliant ecosystem where true loyalty thrived. I walked through the revolving glass doors and entered the massive, bustling lobby of my corporate headquarters. The atmosphere was incredibly electric, filled with the sharp, focused energy of the nation's top cybersecurity analysts and military contractors. As I walked down the central corridor, every single employee I passed stopped their conversations to acknowledge me. They offered respectful nods, warm smiles, and crisp military greetings. There was no pity in their eyes. There was no condescension. There was only absolute, unwavering respect for the woman who led them. I made my way to the private executive elevator and rode it up to the top floor. My corner office offered a stunning panoramic view of the surrounding defense community. I sat behind my polished mahogany desk, opened my encrypted laptop, and prepared to review the morning operational reports. My life was finally structured, peaceful, and perfectly under my own control. My secure desk phone suddenly began to ring. It was not my encrypted federal line. It was my private civilian line, a number very few people still possessed. I glanced at the caller identification screen. The display showed an incoming collect call originating from a state correctional facility. My hand hovered over the receiver for a fraction of a second. I knew exactly who was on the other end of that line. Bradley had been transferred to a federal penitentiary weeks ago, completely disowned by his wealthy parents and facing decades behind bars. My mother was currently living in a cramped, subsidized apartment on the other side of the country, entirely bankrupt and legally barred from ever contacting me again. That left only one person desperate enough to attempt a collect call from a county jail holding cell. I picked up the heavy receiver and pressed the flashing green button to accept the charges. The automated voice of the correctional facility operator played over the line, followed immediately by the frantic, sobbing voice of my older sister. "Zoya! Oh my God! Zoya, please do not hang up on me!" Vanessa shrieked through the incredibly poor phone connection. Her voice was completely stripped of its usual arrogant superiority. She sounded utterly broken, terrified, and pathetic. "You have to help me. I am begging you on my hands and knees. They are transferring me to the maximum security federal prison tomorrow morning. I cannot survive in there. You know I cannot survive in a place like that." I sat perfectly still in my luxurious office listening to the golden child weep. "You should have thought about your survival before you stole millions of dollars from elderly bank clients, Vanessa." "I was wrong," Vanessa sobbed loudly, the desperation making her voice crack. "I lost absolutely everything. Bradley abandoned me. His family's lawyers will not even answer my calls. Mom has no money left to hire a defense attorney for me. You are the only person who can afford to pay my bail. You have billions of dollars in federal contracts. You can afford the best legal team in the country. We are sisters, Zoya. We share the same blood. You cannot just leave me in this concrete box to rot for 20 years. Please, I am begging you to save me." I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office. I thought about the day she tore my deposit check in half. I thought about her calling the armed bank guards to terrorize my crying son. I thought about the malicious fabricated stories she leaked to the press to destroy my reputation. I thought about her relentless attempts to steal my late husband's survivor benefits. She did not care about our shared blood when she was trying to ruin my entire existence. She only cared about our bloodline now, because her bank accounts were seized, and she needed a massive financial lifeline. "Wrong number," I said simply. "Zoya, please," Vanessa screamed into the receiver. "Do not do this to me." I placed the receiver back onto the base, severing the connection with a sharp, definitive click. I picked up my mobile device, accessed my private network settings, and permanently blocked the entire outgoing exchange grid for that specific correctional facility. She would never be able to dial my number again. The communication line was completely and permanently eradicated. I leaned back in my leather executive chair and closed my eyes. The ultimate weight finally lifted entirely off my shoulders. For 34 years, I carried the heavy, suffocating burden of their toxic expectations. I endured their relentless emotional abuse, their colorist remarks, and their coordinated financial attacks. I survived their cruelty by building walls and retreating into the military. But today I did not need to run or hide anymore. I faced the absolute worst they could throw at me, and I emerged completely victorious. The cycle of abuse was permanently broken. The trauma ended right here. I opened my eyes and looked at this framed photograph of Leo sitting on my desk. He was safe, thriving, and his future was secured. We were surrounded by respect, wealth, and peace. The shadows were banished. The war was over and a new era began. I stepped away from the polished mahogany desk, leaving the silent phone resting in its cradle. The oppressive weight of the past. 34 years evaporated from my shoulders, replaced by a surge of absolute clarity. I walked out of my corner office and moved down the glass corridor toward the private family suite I integrated into the executive floor. I opened it. Leo was standing by the windows, peering through a brass telescope. I was fascinated by the sprawling landscape of our new corporate campus, stretching out beyond our perimeter. "Are you ready to go, my brave boy?" I asked, my voice carrying a lightness I had not felt since his father died. Leo spun around, his eyes wide with wonder. "This place is amazing, Mom. It looks like a giant fortress from the future. Are we going to live here forever?" "We absolutely are," I promised, holding out my hand. "We are going to build an incredible life here. Nobody will ever make us feel small again. I have a surprise waiting for you on the roof." He grabbed his backpack and slipped his hand securely into mine. We walked out of the suite and approached the dedicated helipad elevator. Two armed members of my security detail stood at strict attention by the doors. They offered crisp salutes. I nodded, swiping my biometric credential across the scanner. The steel doors slid open silently. We stepped inside the glass-walled elevator and I pressed the button for the roof. The elevator ascended rapidly, offering a panoramic view of the surrounding city as the afternoon transitioned into a fiery dusk. When the doors opened onto the rooftop, the cool autumn air washed over us. The sky was painted in magnificent shades of deep crimson and rich violet. In the absolute center of the elevated helipad sat a sleek, customized black corporate helicopter. The company insignia gleamed proudly on the side. The pilot stood near the open passenger door, waiting patiently for our arrival. Leo gasped loudly, dropping his backpack onto the painted concrete. He looked up at me, his eyes shining with pure joy and admiration. "Is that ours, Mom? Are we really going to fly in that right now?" "It belongs to us," I confirmed, smiling down at the beautiful child who had been my sole reason for fighting so relentlessly against the darkness. "It will take us directly to our new home in the hills. We never have to hide again." Leo wrapped his arms around my waist, hugging me with a fierce strength that reminded me so much of his brave father. He tilted his head back, looking directly into my eyes with profound maturity. "I am so proud of you, Mom. You are the strongest person in the whole world. You defeated the bad guys and you built us a castle." Tears of absolute joy pricked my eyes. I knelt down on the concrete, bringing myself to his eye level. I rested my forehead gently against his, letting the truth of his innocent words heal the lingering scars of my broken childhood. I spent my entire life desperate for validation from a mother who despised me and a sister who envied me. I endured their psychological warfare because I thought family required endless sacrifice. I was entirely wrong. True family builds you up. True family looks at you with the pure pride I saw shining in my son's bright eyes. I am incredibly proud of you too, Leo, I whispered, kissing his warm cheek. We built this castle together. Now let us see our new kingdom. I stood up, took his hand, and we walked toward the waiting aircraft. The pilot greeted us with a respectful nod and helped Leo securely strap into the leather passenger seat. I climbed in beside him, securing my harness as the heavy doors locked shut, sealing us inside the quiet cabin. The powerful dual engines roared to life, sending a thrilling vibration through the sleek frame of the helicopter. The massive rotor blades spun faster and faster, slicing through the crisp evening air until they became a translucent blur against the vibrant sunset. We lifted off the pad, smoothly rising high above the sprawling corporate campus I had built from the ground up. I looked out the tinted window as the aircraft banked gently toward the rolling green hills of the Virginia countryside. The glittering lights of the Metropolitan Defense District began to illuminate the gathering dusk below us. I watched the world shrink beneath my feet, feeling a profound sense of absolute victory. I did not need to destroy my abusers to win the war. I simply needed to rise so incredibly high that their toxic existence could never possibly reach me again. The cycle of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and generational trauma was permanently eradicated. My ultimate revenge was not a vicious counterattack. My ultimate revenge was my own spectacular success. If you are trapped in a toxic family dynamic, please know you are never powerless. You do not have to accept the malicious labels they assign to you. Your fundamental worth is not determined by flawed people who refuse to see your brilliant potential. You possess the internal strength to sever those toxic chains, walk away from the darkness, and build a beautiful empire of your own. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic relatives to protect your peace and secure your future? I would love to read your personal stories of triumph and resilience in the comments below. If this journey of claiming ultimate justice resonated with your heart, please hit that like button right now and subscribe to the channel for more empowering stories of survival and success. Please share this video with someone who might desperately need the courage to stand up for themselves today. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. Always remember to fiercely protect your peace, demand absolute respect, and never apologize for your own spectacular success.